Good morning. It is Saturday the 26th of August. I'm recording this in the morning, so hopefully I won't need to put the light on this week, and therefore I'm not going to have it suddenly go out on me halfway through recording. It wasn't actually a bulb that blew. I've got a long life bulb in the fitting. It was the wires in the base had short-circuited, so I had to rewire the stand, which I've done, and it now works perfectly, so everything's fine. Introductions. My name is Jared, or Peter, or Boniface. I am a crocheter and knitter, a sewer, a weaver, soon to be a spinner, and sometime quilter. I live in Abingdon in Oxfordshire in the south of England, about 7 miles south of the city of Oxford. I come originally from the northwest of England, from Salford in Lancashire, just to the northwest of Manchester, and I've lived away from home since 1990, so that's 27 years, so over half of my life now, which is why I don't have such a strong northwest accent anymore. I live with my two cats, Toby and Bunty, who are not related to each other, but get on most of the time. We have a 5-minute run around in the evening where they fight and seem to pull out a lot of each other's hair, but never actually do any damage to each other, so that's positive. They're both about 5 kilograms, so they're an even match. So I think it's just who has bragging rights for the day. I have a desk over on my left, which looks out over the courtyard outside the building, and I have a door that opens. There's a Juliet balcony, and they seem to squabble over who gets to lie on the desk in the corner, so that they're looking out over the window, and the other one has to sit on the windowsill step. Which seems to be the main part of their disagreement. The rest of the time they sleep together, they eat together, they drink together, so there's very little. But if you didn't know that they weren't siblings, you'd think they were, particularly in the way that they squabble over the most unimportant things in life. Or maybe that's just my family. I'd like to welcome you all back. Spend some more time with me. I'd like to welcome particularly 2 new viewers who have been very kind in messaging me this week. Claudia of Crochet Luna, whose podcast I've started watching as well and I've very much enjoyed. And Cynthia, who's I see has got a podcast. I haven't watched any of her videos yet, but I will be doing. When I started this podcast, it was really just to keep in touch with family and friends, and that's mostly been the people who view it, and there are 2 or 3 other people who have come on board and regularly make comments on my videos, and it's nice to feel part of something bigger than yourself. I never expect anybody to listen very much to what I have to say, but I'm always pleased to share what I'm doing, and if people find that interesting, then that's doubly happy. So welcome back to everyone who's a returning viewer, and welcome if this is your first time in spending some time with me. I hope you enjoy the experience and it's not too much of a letdown for you. So I'll get straight into things. I do have a finished object this week, hurrah! I've made one of these before, which has appeared in a previous video. This is a snuggle sack. Elasticator at the top, made to look like a mermaid. Actually, I always felt slightly dissatisfied with this one. I mean, I love the colour, the royal blue, but I was always slightly dissatisfied that it looked rather like the bottom of a rocket ship. And I realised why. I misread the pattern when I made this one. So I've made another one today, well, finished it yesterday, sorry, which is in this aquamarine turquoise blue-green, and the tail is much more satisfactory. It's much less pointed than the other one. I realised I was only decreasing from one side and not both sides on every round, and that's why this is much more elongated as a tail fin. I don't think it makes a lot of difference to the overall effect. Both of these are made with acrylic yarns. This is Starcraft Special DK, and with both of them I've held 2 strands together, so it's a much thicker cloth than it otherwise would be. I've used what is known as a knitting loom. Both of them were made as flat panels, 2 flat panels for each of them on the second sized loom in this pack of 4. I think there were 31 pegs on this. And I used a pattern from Alison Russell's craft channel. And these are both for babies that are due in September. That's just a month away now. My 2 babies in the family, Lucy, who is my youngest sister, is having a little girl, and Ruth, who is my eldest niece, is having a little boy. So Lucy has chosen the aquamarine, and Ruth, by default, has got the Lucy got in there first, has got the royal blue, but actually she said she prefers the royal blue anyway, so that's a good thing. So they will both be going up to Salford. But one of my other nieces, Ruth's younger sister, Becky, asked for one for her daughter, Charlotte, who is, I think I'm right, currently 9 and will be 10 this year. I'm sure she was born in 2007, and I'm sure she was born at the end of the year. I'll have to double check. I've got so many nieces and nephews, and great nieces and nephews, I sometimes forget whose birthday is when. But she's that little bit older, so I'm making this on a larger loom. And when asked what colour, that was a silly question really, she's 9 years old and is a very sweet young lady, she wanted pink, and the pinkest pink I could find. So I've come up with this pink, which is the Sirdar, this is also Starcraft Special acrylic, and is their fondant colour, which is a very pink, a bubblegum pink almost, I would call it, but I've described it to Becky to tell Charlotte that it's Mermaid Princess pink. And I said at the very beginning that this is called a knitting loom. Personally, I don't think it should be. I use E-wraps, which literally means that I take the yarn and I wrap it like a letter E around each of the pegs. I know you won't be able to see very clearly what I'm doing, but that's what I do. And then you take the hook and you pull the lower loops over the upper loops, and that creates each of the stitches, and it's a lovely stitch pattern it creates and makes it look very like scales, which is why it works for the fishtails so well. But this being a hook and there not being a needle anywhere, I personally think this should actually be called a crochet loom, because crochet is French for hook. I'm knotting the yarn, as it were, using a hook, and therefore it's a form of crochet. In a way, it's a kind of halfway house between knitting and crochet, because with crochet, significantly, and for me making it easier to do, sorry Toby, you really are in the way sometimes, aren't you? With crochet, each individual stitch is an individual stitch. It's connected at the top to the next stitch, but it's a lot easier to undo stitches in crochet because you only ever have one stitch on the crochet hook at a time. Whereas with knitting, you tend to have the whole row of stitches, and you knit through each one of them, and then you have a new whole row of stitches on. And in a way, this is doing both of those. So each stitch is individual, but is connected to the next stitch. So you have individual stitches on each peg rather than all on one peg, and you use a hook in order to create the next stitch on that peg. But in a sense, the whole thing is connected as well, in the same way that it is in normal knitting. So it's a kind of halfway house. I prefer to think of it as a crochet loom, and I'm going to refer to it forever after now as a crochet loom. And given that crochet is my first love over knitting, I think that's a very positive thing for me. So that was my finished object for the week, was the smaller version, and my new work in progress is the larger version for Charlotte, so she's not going to be left out. She wants it for her reading corner, which is an even better reason to be making it, I think. I don't have any other new works in progress. I've not done much in the way of... Oh no, sorry, I do. I tell a lie. How awful. I'd forgotten. I'm just going to move this camera a little closer because I think it's a little far away. And Toby, my dear, I'm in the middle of podcasting, my ducks, so I can't be spending all my time fussing over you and stroking you and making you feel wonderful about life. I have to talk to the people who are listening at the moment, if that's all right. Yes? May I get on with it then? A while ago, Karen brought out a celebration of their anniversary of being founded, which was the Karen Cake, and they brought out this self-banding, beautiful cakes of yarn, and other companies have they sold out almost straight away and had to make a whole lot more. The demand was so great, and other companies have jumped onto the bandwagon, and I've made a few items with other brands, but I've started work on a new scarf. And sorry, Toby, you're going to have to go away, my dove. There you go. Sorry, he's just starting to lick me. It's very distracting while I'm in the middle of trying to speak. So I've started a new project, which is something that was on YouTube. Mikey from the Crochet Crowd was making this for the All Free Crochet channel. And it's a alligator or crocodile scale scarf. This orange is wonderful. I don't know if you can actually tell. You may be able to pick up on there. It's not a solid colour. It's actually, I was surprised, it's actually very tonal. And there are flecks of other colours in there. There's some flecks of red and some flecks of white in there. But it's also quite tonal in shade. So the cake I'm using is actually Woolcraft cake, which is a 200-gram ball of medium worsted weight acrylic and wool mix. So it's an 80% acrylic, 20% wool mix. And the colorway is shade 3, which is always very helpful when they just say it's shade 3. I do dislike it when they do things like that. Why don't they just tell us what the colours are called? They all have names, but these are the colours that are going to be in the scarf. Actually, I'll do it that way around, and you'll see the oranges in the middle, and it becomes yellow, and then this purple, and then this magenta colour. So I'm quite... and then it repeats. It's kind of lilac with the purple, I guess. Now, what Mikey said was that this one ball will actually only do one side. He used two 100-gram balls. I'm using a 200-gram ball. So this is only going to do up one side. So I decided that I wouldn't make it identical, that my scales are going to have a bit of an identity crisis, if you like. As well as that, I'm going to be using this, which is the shade 9 colourway. And I think with the magenta being common to both, that will be sufficient to pull the two sides together as a single unit. And the idea is that you have the scales going up one side and then you join them as a seam in the back with the scales coming down the other side. And because of it's this very simple repeated pattern, once you get into the frame of it, it's not reversible. There's a lattice work goes at the back which the scales are built onto, but it's alternating 4 scales and 3 scales and 4 scales and 3 scales all the way up, which is a very attractive pattern. I just started this morning and I'm really enjoying the construction. It's a very simple construction. There are effectively 5 front post treble crochets going down a post, and then 5 front post treble crochets coming up the post on the other side. Which is basically that's basically the construction, and then the foundation row above is just putting 2 treble crochets into the middle of a scale, then into the middle of 2, so it's producing a framework. And then where I created a scale in the end, 2 treble crochet posts, and the next row I'll do it in the second one, and then in the next row it'll be in the first, and the next one in the second, and that's what produces this layered textured effect. Sorry, I'm not being very clear on that, but I understand what I mean, even though you probably don't. It's a very good video. It's well worth going online. Mikey is very clear with his instructions. He takes you through every step. He's got excellent educational videos on the patterns, and really is a very competent teacher. So that's my other work in progress that I've started today, and I'm ongoing with the jumper. I've not done as much on the jumper in the last week because I was working on the mermaid tail blanket, snuggle blanket. It's that constant tension, I think, that all crafters feel, that knitting and crocheting for yourself is somehow selfish, and your focus should be on doing it for other people. So I spent 2 weeks working on the jumper. I'm getting to a point where it's almost done. I want to finish it this week, which I probably will be able to get that done. But I also want to get other things done as well for other people. So it's just about managing the time as much as anything else. This week I'm going to be in a very fortunate position in that I've taken a week's holiday. The last weekend of August, the last full weekend of August in England and Wales is a bank holiday weekend. The Monday is a bank holiday. In Scotland they don't have this bank holiday because they have a second bank holiday, the New Year, that we don't have in England and Wales. We just have New Year's Day. They have New Year's Day, and the 2nd of January is bank holidays, because New Year is a much more significant holiday in Scotland than it is in England. Which I can go into the detail of if you're really interested. It's all to do with the Reformation, when England maintained a certain degree of its Catholic identity within the Anglican Church, bishops and sacraments and the like, whereas the Scots went fully Presbyterian, and so abolished feasts like Christmas as being the centre point of the winter festival, and made New Year the centre point of the winter festival instead. So Christmas and Boxing Day in England are much more significant, whereas New Year's and New Year's week is much more significant in Scotland, with Hogmanay and all the rest of it. So the upshot of that is we all have 8 public holidays, but one of ours is at the end of August, and rather than the 2nd of January. And because it's already taking a long weekend, I thought I'd just make it a full week's holiday. I seem to have settled into my new role. I'm up to date with everything, and it's a fairly quiet time of year because there's less traffic on the roads, so neither the insurance nor the investigation of accidents is as pressing at this time of year. So I thought it was a good opportunity to take a few days and catch up with some of my crafts. I haven't done any spinning at all this week, but I will be doing some of that over the next few days while I'm off. It's going to be a fairly action-packed few days. I've got a quilt that I'm working on as well as a wedding present, but I've bought a class on Etsy. Sorry, I bought something else on Etsy, which I'll talk about later. I've bought a class on Craftsy YouTube channel, which is about spindle spinning, and is reputed to be extremely good. So I'm hopefully going to give some time to that in the next week, and with that video, actually get to grips with spinning some of my own wool. So I've got a few acquisitions I ought to talk about. Yes, so the first thing is a knitting pattern book, which I've seen on a few different podcasts, not least being the Yarn Hoarder, because her husband's printing company actually printed the pattern book, and it's called Minnesota 52, and it's by Corey Eichelberger and Megan Williams, who both live in Minnesota, and when they visit each other, I think they're the two down here at the bottom corner, when they visit each other they have to drive along Minnesota 52, so Route 52 in Minnesota. And also when they visit their local yarn shops or go to events, they drive down this road. So it's full of lovely patterns, some beautiful colour choices as well. I love the blue with the moss green, I guess. I mean, it's a very similar image on the front cover, in fact. And they're colours that appeal to me, but I really, really, really like this interlocking arrow pattern on the hat, and this also on the mittens as well. So I think I might have a go at that, because I really think that's colour work is a very difficult thing to make for a man, because it's very easy to look a little bit too effete, whereas some strong blocks, which is almost graphic design kind of block work, really does lend itself to masculine projects as well. But I also quite like this hooded top, so I may make that for myself, because part of my job is going to be, and also again, this cowl and hat look fabulous. So I think there are quite a few projects that within here that I really quite like the look of, so I'm going to be able to make for myself. As I was saying, quite a large part of my job takes me out and about in the yard of the bus depot where I work, and that's fine in August. It's actually been quite mild in the last few weeks, and when it has rained, it's not rained first thing in the morning. You come sit with me again, Toby. You're going to be quiet this time. Be a good boy. There you go. So when it's rained, it's actually rained later on in the morning, and I've not got absolutely soaking wet. But as we turn to autumn first and then into the winter, it's going to get colder and wetter. And I start work at 6:30 in the morning, so it's going to be darker as well. Which the point about the darker is it feels colder when it's darker, I think. It's all psychological. It's not actually colder, but it can feel a lot colder and wetter when it's darker. So I will be out and about in the yard in all weather conditions, going to vehicles and either downloading CCTV from them or checking that the systems are operational while they're not out on the road. We do a health check every month just to make sure the systems are working. So having warm items to wear is actually going to be quite important for me. And I've got quite a few different things that I want to make for myself, interspersed amongst all the things that I'm making for other people. So I hope to get some of those things done soon. Another book I bought this week was a direct result of Claudia. She crochets, and crochet is she's very good at, from the items that I've seen her finish on her podcast. And in the most recent episode, there is a beautiful granny square style shawl on a mannequin behind her, which just looks fantastic. And it's just the basic Claudia, 3 treble crochets in the UK, 3 double crochets in the States, and then a gap, and then 3 more in working in those shells as you do in granny squares, and it just looks fantastic. But she also has a granny square tote bag that she's just made, and It's as much the colour choices as the actual pattern. As she says, it's just granny squares, larger granny squares, but her colour choices are fabulous and rich. She lives in San Diego, California, which I imagine is a very sunny, bright, strongly coloured place to live, being not far from the Pacific Ocean, but also being not that far from the deserts of Southern America anyway. So I can imagine that there are really very strong ochres and dark greens of cactus and that kind of palms, that kind of environment. I've no idea if that's true, but that, in my imagination, that is San Diego for me. And orange for oranges, and the deep dark green of avocados and that kind of thing. So sorry if I'm getting carried away, but so that she doesn't knit, or doesn't knit very much. So everything she makes is crocheted, including socks. And she showed this book on her podcast, and I thought, I didn't know I could crochet socks. As you know, I've knit a couple of pairs of socks, and I'm working on another pair at the moment, but using 4-ply in particular, knitting them is taking quite a long time. And I love doing it, but it is something I have to give quite a bit of time over to doing. I'm not a fast knitter, certainly not as fast as I am a crocheter. So I have bought this book, and there are a number of different styles. There are lace styles, quite dense. I love the colours, but quite densely fabricked socks. There are ankle socks. As you can see, there are patterns there are ankle socks. Cables or cable style socks. As I say, some lacework socks. So I'm really looking forward to trying out some of these. And as ever with socks, I don't think it's so much the patterns as the colours you choose that make them socks for a woman or socks for a man. I mean, in most cases, I'm quite happy to wear quite strongly coloured things, but I wouldn't probably wear that pink. I might wear pink, but it wouldn't necessarily be that pink. Bit like with the mermaid fishtail blankets, I wouldn't make anything in this style of pink for myself, probably, because it's a little bit too I'm not sure what it is. It's strongly associated with women, femininity, I guess, and it isn't very masculine. But there are some pinks which are very masculine, and they tend to be the paler pinks. But anyway, I will just pick and choose as I feel comfortable. I mean, one of the things that I have said before, it's only by working with yarn over the last 12 months or so now that I've discovered that I actually have quite a strong... I'm tolerant of quite strong colours for things for myself and to work with. I always imagined I was a fairly pastel shaded, fade into the background kind of person. Turns out I'm not, which has been a revelation to me as much as anything else. Having said that, I've gone through my wardrobe recently, thinning out clothes that I don't wear anymore to send off to various charities that collect clothes items. And I've been struck actually by how strong some of the colours are of some of the shirts that I've had. So maybe I've always had this strong colour sense, but not really adverted to it. But now that I'm working with yarns and choosing colours, I'm noticing much more that I'm choosing different colours. I've also, this month's magazines have arrived, so the Crochet Collection, which comes with a really attractive collection of acrylic yarns to make some of the items with, but they're items that can also be made using any colours I choose. I love the hedgehog. I just think that's so adorable. So there are lots of different things that can be made. I've got 2 babies that are due in September, another baby from a friend. She's expecting her first child in December, January. There are just some lovely items in here. She's going to find out the sex of the baby this week, I think. So that's going to be an exciting moment for her. There was something... Ah, there we are. And this made me think of Claudia as well, because it's called Diego the Parrot, which she lives in San Diego, which I just think is lovely. So I may well make a couple of these things. Oh, such an adorable bear. That is a really lovely teddy bear. I think I can feel a teddy bear making coming on. Especially when you see a picture like that with the baby laughing, holding the teddy bear, that just makes you want to make it. It's terrible, the things they do to me, these magazines. They make me make things all the time, or at least want to. And it's one of the things that actually, again, Claudia mentioned. She points out lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different patterns that she wants to make and that she will be making. But they're not necessarily that they have to be made today. They're not going to be the next thing that I do. If you just bear with me a second, sorry, I just need to... We are, sorry, I'm now back again. I had to just get a couple of things to talk about. So, yeah, it's not necessarily that I will make everything that I want to make, but knowing the things I want to make and the patterns I want to try in particular, and it tends to be more that it's the patterns I want to try making rather than the thing that I end up with. And I've said this before, I'm process rather than product driven on the whole. The fact that I may never make some of the things that I say in these podcasts I want to make doesn't take away from the enjoyment you get, at least of thinking about the things that you might want to make and the patterns that you might want to try that may be more difficult than usual. So I've also got another magazine, Let's Get Crafting, Knitting and Crochet, which this month is mostly crochet, in fact, rather than knitting, but this is their Christmas. And again, this came with a lovely bright colours of yarn called Candy Cane, I think this, including this, which is a furry yarn, which mimics beards or snow, because this is their Christmas toy edition. And there are a couple of things in here that I really like the look of. I think they're at the back, actually. Yes, they are. There's this lovely penguin pyjama case. Adorable cuddly owl called Ozzy. I'm very much one for owls, I've discovered as well. I really, really, really love owls. But the other item, which I had considered making, but I don't know if I'm knitting patterns for, are some Christmas baubles. And they've recommended colour palettes based on the yarns that they provide free. But one of the things I quite like to do with these is I've got several yarns in red and green that are sparkly, and I think they would really work interspersed with the standard acrylic yarns that are used on here to make some Christmas baubles as gifts to give to people. So I'm quite keen to try those out. And then there's Mr. and Mrs. Santa Claus with the lovely beard and the hair from the fuzzy. So I shall enjoy having a look through there. I will make some of those things, others I will want to make but never actually get round to. But as I say, that's part and parcel of the whole process. I was also given by a friend who was having a good clear out quite a large supply of cones of yarn, mostly 4-ply from the thinness, which I've been winding into separate 100-gram cakes because I found it easier to store than a large So this is a lot easier to store, even in several parts, than one of these. I'm finding that it's between 300 and 400 grams of yarn on each of these cones. They also smell a little musty because they've been in a bag for a long time, but I have a solution for that. I think I've mentioned before, one of the things about storing yarn is that it can get very musty smelling, and it can also attract moths who like the natural fibres in wool in particular. And so I bought on Amazon a while ago the boxes didn't come, but it came in a bag. These are lavender buds. And the smell as you open this is just, so they're just lots and lots and lots of little lavender buds, and the aroma is fantastic. And I bought some little organza bags like this, and I just popped one of these in every drawer and in every tub and in every pack where I'm storing yarn. And I also put one of these into every package that I wrap of a finished item, because it just, the lavender scent pervades through the whole of the yarns and the items that are done. And lavender, as you know, is a very restful scent. It's often used as a natural sleep remedy to help people to relax and fall asleep. So it's a very nice thing, and I often have some next to my bed as well. It's just a lovely scent. Sorry, I absolutely love lavender, and this whole box full of lavender, I mean, I've used quite a bit and there's still a huge amount left. I think this cost me about £7 or £8 to buy on Amazon. So there are. It's not an expensive thing by any means, and it really, really, really does make a difference. So I will be putting, as I say, there's a fairly strong musty smell from them. So hopefully with a couple of organza bags of lavender buds in there, that will help. And tucked down at the very bottom was this DPN set. These are 5mm DPNs, and they come with their own rather attractive little cozy, which I've restrung because the plastic, again, it was a fairly old set and the plastic had frayed away. And I love the beads. I think the beads are also attractive. It's just quite a nice little cozy set. So even when there's an item on the needles, it will be possible to store the needles quite comfortably, quite happily, with the nice little decoration. It's not quite in the middle, but I'm not a perfectionist. I don't care. It looks nice. I like it. And the final acquisition, before I move on to other things, I mentioned them last week. The egg boxes arrived, and this is how they look. And I just think, so as I said last week, I've been given a huge amount of acrylic yarn. And I'm a school governor, and I want to go into school to help introduce the children to fibre-related crafts. And acrylic yarn is ideal for that because it's not going to have a problem with allergies, and it's inexpensive yarn, so it's not going to matter that children will make mistakes and it might get knotted and all that kind of thing. So I'm winding the yarn into 10-gram balls ready to use, and putting them into these egg boxes, which are very inexpensive, from Amazon. And the advantage then is that you can take the yarn from the outside and just start to unwind. And the yarn ball will actually sit in the lid as it's open, so that provides a nice little cradle that will stop the yarn ball from rolling all around the floor. And the advantage of these egg cartons is it just holds everything neat inside. It prevents them unraveling and getting tangled up together, and reduces the amount of dust that they're exposed to, and makes them look really very attractive. I've not wound any more balls at the moment, but there will be one of 6 different colours in each box, and I'll be dividing them up into 3 light and 3 dark shades. So here the dark would be the teal, the red, and the green, because they're actually quite dark colours, and then there'd be the pink, the blue, and probably a pale yellow or a cream colour, something like that, just to provide the contrast for them. And I'm going to teach them how to make French looms, and we'll make coasters out of the I-cord that they create with the French loom. So it's beginning to look the part now. So I think these, you know, the children are going to be excited to get hold of one of these. They just look attractive. The jewel-like tones of the acrylic yarns that I've been given really lend themselves to being presented in this way. So I'm hopeful that it will be a positive experience, and at least one of the children might want to take on further interest in fibre-related crafting. So I said last week that I would talk a little bit about wool, given that it has become such a significant part of my life, and with the spinning, I hope it to become an even more significant part of my life. So I've been doing a little bit of research. I found a marvellous article on historyhouse.co.uk, which is about being buried in wool. There is a phrase that is found a lot in old church registers of burials. By old, I mean 16th, 17th, even into the 18th century. And this is because in 1666, an act was passed in Parliament. Now, 1666 to English is the Great Fire of London, to start with. It's 6 years after the Restoration in 1660, when Charles II was returned to the throne, Charles I, his father, having been executed in 1649. And the Commonwealth under Oliver Cromwell during the interregnum period. So 1666, there was an Act of Parliament which was designed to protect the British wool industry. And so it was determined that, and I can read you the actual, it's actually got a scan of the actual Act. No corpse or any person, except those who shall die of the plague, shall be buried in any shirt, shift, sheet or shroud. That's actually quite difficult to say. Shirt, shift, sheet or shroud, or anything whatsoever made of or mingled with flax, hemp, silk, hair, gold or silver, or in any stuff or thing other than what is made of sheep's wool only, or be put into any coffin, lined or faced with any sort of cloth or stuff, or any other thing whatsoever that is made of any other material but sheep's wool only, on pain of forfeiting £5, as hereinafter mentioned. So this was 1666, and if you failed to comply, you were fined £5, which in 1666 was a lot of money. But in practice, people largely ignored the Act because, well, the poor only had woolen clothing to begin with, and the rich wanted to be buried with their fancy items. I've never really understood why, but that kind of funeral rite has been a part of the human psyche for a very, very long time, of being buried with the things that mean most to you, whether it's the wonderful tombs of emperors and kings in Egypt or China, or even the grave goods that were buried routinely with ordinary people in Roman and Anglo-Saxon times, and archaeologists find out so much about such things when they dig them. There's a marvellous line from Richard Steele. Sorry, this is all the same article. Richard Steele wrote a play in 1700 called The Funeral, and there's a 2-line ridicule of this particular Act of Parliament. Harky hussy, if you should, as I hope you won't, outlive me, take care. I ain't buried in flannel, 'twould never become a man, I'm sure. And, sorry, in Pope's Moral Essays, Epistle 1, odious in woolen, 'twould a saint provoke, were the last words that poor Narcissa spoke. No, let a charming chintz and Brussels lace wrap my cold limbs and shade my lifeless face. Narcissa was Mrs. Oldfield, who was an actress who died in 1731 and was buried in Brussels lace, which was quite infamous at the time. So the Act was in force until 1814. In most cases, a family member would actually report a rich person not being buried in wool, so that half of the £5 that was paid as a fine was paid back to the family, because the person who actually ratted on those who were failing to comply with the Act got half the reward, and the other £2 and 10 shillings went to the Exchequer as a fine. So that's quite interesting. But wool has been an item which has a long history in human spinning. And one of the reasons is, well, several of the reasons, I guess, it's a very fine insulating fabric, which means not only that it keeps you warm when it's cold, but it actually can also keep you cool when it's hot. It's fire retardant, so naturally fire retardant, so when it burns, it tends to singe in a small area and then put itself out effectively. It doesn't drip plastic in the way that artificial fibres do, which is why it's often used for things like uniforms and firemen's uniforms and carpeting in high-risk areas, and wall insulation. It can also be used for composting because it's protein and it will decompose. It's a natural fibre. Curiously, sheep naturally would only grow hair in the same way that goats grow hair. They have been selectively bred over the millennia to develop woolly coats, and there was a famous sheep in Australia which was had escaped from the compound where it would normally have been sheared every year and went missing for 5 years. And during that 5 years, it grew and grew and grew, this woolen coat, such that eventually, when it was spotted by a walker and the animal authorities were alerted and they captured the sheep and sheared it and treated it for the wool lice that was in the, that had found a very warm and comfortable home living in the sheep's fleece. The fleece itself weighed 92 kilograms. Now, 92 kilograms is about 200 pounds. That's one heck of a heavy fleece. That poor sheep, if it had fallen over, frankly, it probably would never have been able to get itself back on its feet because it would have just been rolling from side to side. It was such a big, heavy fleece. Anyway, the sheep did fine after that, but it's essential for sheep to be shorn at least twice a year. Some sheep, because of the speed with which their coats grow, it has to be up to 4 times a year. And there is actually no difference in the fibres that we call wool and the fibres that other animals produce, including ourselves, and we call hair. But under legislation in the UK, only sheep's wool is called wool. Every other fibre that is produced, so whether it be from camelids like camels, alpacas, llamas, or whether it's Angora rabbit hair or cashmere goat hair, they're all hair, and they're sold as hair. products. They're not sold as wool. Only sheep's wool is sold as wool. And this was established by Act of Parliament in 1947 in the Agriculture Act, and again in 1949 in the Agricultural Marketing Act. The British Wool Marketing Board was established, and the British Wool Marketing Board compulsorily buys all wool that is produced in the UK to be sold in the UK. So if you produce wool for export only, then it's not bought by the British Wool Marketing Board. But if it is for sale within the UK, then it is sold exclusively to the Wool Marketing Board unless you have fewer than 5 sheep. So if you have a small holding and you have 1, 2, 3 or 4 sheep, then the wool that you have from those sheep you can sell privately within the UK. And there are a number of reasons for this particular piece of legislation, and it's mostly to protect wool producers, because the UK only produces around 3% of the world's wool. So getting a good price for the wool is essential for the success and well-being of the producers of the wool. And the fear is that without having a centralized control to sell the wool on the open market, as small producers, you would just be too small a volume to actually get a good enough price for the producers to continue producing the wool. And it was particularly important in the 1950s when wool was still the major element of clothing manufacture. And of course during the war had been protected quite closely by government because of the need to produce uniforms for the 1/4 of the UK population that actually were wearing uniforms during the First World War period. In 2008, a review was held by the Department of the Environment, which incorporates the Department for the Environment's and Rural Affairs, and the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food in the UK. And because the Wool Marketing Board is now the only one of the marketing boards that were initially set up in the 1940s that remains, all the other industries like the milk producing industry, the beef producing industry, they are all strong enough now to stand on their own merits. But the Wool Marketing Board, there was a question as to whether or not it was still needed. And if you are really interested, there is a 76-page government document on all the reasons why they were asked to look into the continuation of the Marketing Board and their conclusions. And their ultimate conclusion is that there still is a need for the Wool Marketing Board to exist. Now, one of the problems for artisanal producers of wool is that the particular qualities of their product are often not valued by the larger market, and so they have contested for a number of years that they should not be covered by this agreement and that they should be able to sell their wool domestically even if they have more than 5 sheep, because the nature of their wool is such that it will only appeal to small-scale domestic use, artisanal product. In fact, part of the review showed that you can have up to 3 tons per producer of artisanal product. Up to 3 tons, or metric tons that is, of wool can be sold domestically without being sold to the Wool Marketing Board. And 95% of the wool that is sold privately in the UK falls under the standard rules of the Wool Marketing Board anyway. So you're only talking about 5% of artisanal producers who fall outside of the scope of this, and they can be given exemptions anyway, and though they are time limited to 3 or 5 years. So I think that the underlying point of the whole thing is that although it is a command economy approach to wool production. It actually still serves a useful function in the UK economy to have this centralised control of wool. But as part of the whole thing, the Wool Marketing Board does produce a lot of fact sheets. So, world sheep populations. China has the most sheep in the world. It has 162,062. Sorry, those are hundreds of thousands. So those are thousands. So it's actually 162,062,000 sheep. Whereas in the United Kingdom we have 33 million sheep. That would be right. And in terms of production of wool, Australia is the single biggest producer of wool, in that it has 276,000 tonnes of wool, and the United Kingdom in comparison produces 20,000 tonnes of wool a year. So you can see from those figures that the UK's wool industry is, as a part of the global total, fairly small, but it is still a significant, it's one of the most significant of the small producers. And I mentioned last time that that New Zealand, which has the largest production, has a quarter of the world's production of wool, only has 4 breeds from which that wool is produced, whereas the UK, which produces 3% of the world's wool, has 74 breeds. And I will give you their names. There are some fantastic names here. So we have Berrichon. These are all the fine wool producers. These are the grades of wool that the Wool Marketing Board uses. So you have Berrichon Douceur, which is clearly a French import, though is now a UK breed. British Rouge, Charolais, the Clune Forest, the Dorset Down, the Dorset Horn, the Hampshire Down, the Ile-de-France, the Norfolk Horn, the Oxford Down, which is our local sheep, the Portland Down, Ryland, Shropshire, South Down, Suffolk, and Van Dien. So those are all the fine sheep. The medium wool sheep, we have Beltex, Bleu du Maine, Border Leicester, British Milk Sheep, the Cambridge, the Devon Close Wool, the Friesland, which is obviously Dutch in origin, the half-bred Scotch, the half-bred Welsh, though it doesn't say what they're half-bred with, the Llanwennog, the Llyn, which is the North Wales Peninsula above the top of Cardigan Bay with Holyhead Island on Anglesey, the port to Ireland, Romney, the Texel, and then we go into the crossbreeds. So we have the Masham sheep, the Mule, north of England, the Mule Scotch, the Mule Welsh. They're obviously crossbreeds, though what they're crossed with I don't know. Scottish Greyface. Then we have the Lustre sheep. So these are the ones that you tend to have the wool made from. So blue-faced Leicester, which is a very famous type of wool that's used in by knitters and crocheters. The Cotswold, the Devon and Cornwall long wool, the Greyface Dartmoor, the Leicester long wool, the Lincoln long wool, Teeswater, Wensleydale, the white-faced Dartmoor. Then you have the hill sheep. Now the hill sheep tend to be the indigenous populations. These are specifically on the hills of England and Wales mostly. They tend to have a hardier wool, which is used in carpet production. 60% of UK wool production is used in the production of carpets. So you have the Beulah speckled face, the Brecknock Hill Cheviot, the Cheviot, the Derbyshire Gritstone, the Exmoor Horn, the Hill Radnor, Kerry Hill, the Lonk, which is a fabulous name and comes from Lancashire, like me, the North Country Cheviot, Shetland, which is a particular protected breed, and I'll come to that in a moment, the Welsh Hill Speckled Face, and the White-Faced Woodland. Now the Shetland, I've mentioned, is a special breed because it's not covered by the Wool Marketing Board's right to buy wool. Shetland wool is only Shetland wool if it comes from a Shetland sheep produced on the islands, the Shetland Islands, and a Shetland jersey is only a Shetland jersey if it uses wool produced by a Shetland sheep on the Shetland Islands and the wool is turned into a jersey on the Shetland Islands. It's a protected appellation contrôlée, they call it in France. It's a controlled name. So to be a Shetland, it has to be that type of sheep living in that part of the world, and the wool has to be turned into the garment in that part of the world. It's just one of those things. And actually, without those protections, the Shetland Island economy would probably not exist in any real sense. They're more expensive things to buy. They're effectively the same as designer clothes, but protecting the name protects the economy of those islands and allows people to still live there and the breed to still exist and the lifestyle to be maintained. Then you've got the mountain sheep. Now these are the ones who will live on the Pennines and in Scotland and in North Wales. So you've got the Blackface, the Dales bred, the Rough Fell, the South Wales Mountain, Swale Dale, and Welsh Mountain sheep. And then finally the naturally coloured sheep. So these are the sheep whose fleece is naturally not white or cream coloured. So you get browns and blacks and sometimes speckled fleeces from these sheep. So you get the Badgerface Welsh Mountain, marvellous name, the Balwen, the Black Welsh Mountain, the Borray, the Castle Milk Morit, the Hebridean, the Herdwick, the Jacob sheep, Manx Longtorn, the North Ronaldsay, the Shetland Coloured, the Soay, and the Swartballs, which is a fabulous name. And for each of those sheep, the Wool Marketing Board produces a little fact sheet. I printed out the one for the Lonk, because I just love the name, and it tells you when the Society to Protect the Breed was founded. In this case, that was 1905. The handle, which is medium soft, so that's what it feels like in the hand. The colour of the fleece, which is white. The fleece weight per sheep, which is 2 to 3 kilograms. The staple length, which is the length of each of the fibres, which is 10 to 15 centimetres, so that would mean it's not going to fall apart very easily, and it's quite a hardy wool. And the micron range, which is the thickness of the wool fibres, which is 32 to 33 microns thick, which means it's quite a hardy wool, and it will be unsurprising, its main use is in carpets. The Lonk is a hill sheep and lives in the Pennines, which are the hills that separate Lancashire from Yorkshire, running up the middle of the country. Toby, I'm in the middle of talking, dear heart. Thank you. And the other sheet I printed off was the Blue-Faced Leicester. And the Blue-Faced Leicester was established in 1963 as a separate breed. Its handle is lustrous and silky, so that means it's nice to touch and to make garments out of, which anybody who's used Blue-Faced Leicester in their sweaters, for example, knows it's got a lovely feel to it. Its natural colour is cream, and it produces a 1 to 2 kilogram fleece per sheep. Its staple length can be anywhere from 8 to 15 centimetres long, and its micron range is much finer. It's 26 to 26.5 microns thick. And I think you can tell looking at the pictures that the Lonk is a much more hardy looking sheep. That's a sheep that has to survive in quite rigorous terrain, whereas the Blue-Faced Leicester is much more bucolic in a sense. It's much more a kind of pastureland sheep that we're familiar with seeing, and it's been really fun reading about wool production in the UK, and I think there's a lot to be said for using natural fibres where we can. Primarily, they're a renewable resource, and in a world which is worried about its ecology, that protecting as many breeds as we can to maintain a vigorous interbreeding program and livestock protection has to be a positive thing. There are, however, concerns. One of the things that British Wool is very keen to point out is the high standard of husbandry that is demanded of British wool producers. Whilst British Wool themselves don't have the right to intervene if they believe that there is a case of animal cruelty or lack of care and neglect going on, they do have a rigorous reporting procedure to both DEFRA, the Department of the Environment and Floral Affairs, and also to the RSPCA and various other animal welfare groups and the police, if necessary. So they also train and provide training for shearers. One of the big problems with wool production is that shearers are paid by the fleece rather than by the hour. So there is an emphasis on getting as much done in as little time as possible, which leads to unintended cruelty to the animals, body parts being sliced, sometimes being sliced completely off in the shearer's haste to get the fleece off the animal. And there are also welfare issues surrounding one of the problems for sheep with longer hair is that the area around the rump gets tangled and knotted with fecal matter and urine and the like, and it provides a breeding ground for lice and ticks to live, and that's potentially hazardous to the well-being of the sheep and devalues the fleece that's taken off the sheep. So one of the processes that happens particularly in Australia is a strip of skin is removed from either side of the tail along the flanks in order to avoid the contamination. And as with any surgery, taking a slice of skin off, it's painful. And there are health benefits to the sheep in doing it. So it can be worth carrying out this procedure. But in Australia in particular, there is a major issue in that the sheep do not have to be anaesthetised, or the air of the sheep doesn't have to be anaesthetised. They don't have to be given analgesics in order to deal with the pain while the scars heal. And the procedure doesn't even have to be carried out by a trained vet. It can be carried out by just an ordinary person. So there are significant issues with animal welfare. And one of the ways you can avoid unnecessary suffering and cruelty, sure, as PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, has pointed out, if we didn't use wool, then we wouldn't be faced with having to carry out some of the procedures that we carry out on sheep in order to reduce the hazard to them and to the fleece. And so not using wool products at all is an option. It's not one I agree with. I think it avoids the problem and doesn't really explain what would happen to all the sheep if we decided to no longer use their fleeces and no longer eat their meat. No farmer is going to keep the millions upon millions of sheep that exist in, say, China, if no one's eating the meat and no one's using the fleece for anything. So I don't think it's a realistic solution to the issue. All we can do is demand higher welfare standards, demand them from our producers, demand them from our legislators. I've mentioned Australia a couple of times, but one of the biggest problems with the animal welfare actually arises in China. And it's partly because we don't insist upon particular humane standards of treatment internationally. So I think we as people who love yarn, who love using wool, who love the end product, who love the process, we have choices to make. When we buy, we can buy from reputable companies. We can buy from producers who know how their wool is produced and can testify to the higher standards of animal husbandry that we would expect and demand from our producers. We can campaign to our elected representatives to insist upon higher international welfare standards across the board. And I think we have a moral duty to do so. I think we who enjoy the product should also take some responsibility for the process by which that product is achieved. And if we work together, and I know that those people in the knitting and crocheting community are kind-hearted people, the very fact that we make things for other people is a reflection of our good natures. And so many, I've watched so many podcasters, and so many of us have got animals that live with us and we love to pieces and back, even if they are a nuisance sometimes, Toby. I think indicates that our hearts are in the right place, and perhaps we need to just put our money where our mouth is from time to time and take those actions that we can take to improve the quality of lives of the animals that provide us with the thing that we love so much. I think I've presented a case here, and I wouldn't want to traduce the reputations of those producers who are probably in the majority anyway, who do care for their animals and understand that a happy animal produces better quality food and better quality fleece for the end consumer. And we need to celebrate our animals, we need to celebrate what they give us, and we need to give them the best that we can so that they have as good a life as they can have. Or become vegan, which is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. But we have choices before us, and I think, we can't shy away from the truth and the reality of the world that we create for ourselves and for those that inhabit the world with us. So, sorry to get heavy at the end, but I'm optimistic and hopeful that there are enough good people out there who will work to improve the lot of those who were not able to work for themselves to that end. And on that note, I think I have probably talked myself to a stop now. I talked about everything I wanted to talk about, and I hope you've enjoyed spending some time with me, and it's been interesting and informative, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. So until next time, stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy, and good luck with your next project.